Hello, everybody. I'm Franz Hochstrasser, CEO and co-founder of Raise Green, and welcome to our 10th Raise Green Community Investor Day. As of today, we are about a third of the way through the 2020s, the decade that's identified by the world's best scientists as being the critical one for humanity's ability to address the climate crisis and avoid some of the worst impacts of climate change, which for anyone on the East Coast in New York or DC over the last week and a half or so, we've experienced firsthand with dangerous levels of air pollution through Canadian wildfire smoke. But these are just some of the recent examples of impacts that we are already seeing. However, 9 months ago, after the passage, we saw the passage of historic climate legislation in the US, the Inflation Reduction Act, and we are seeing a meteoric growth in clean energy and climate solutions and climate investing in the US ever since. So some of the new tax incentives are helping to draw private capital off the sidelines at record levels. And the International Energy Agency just a couple of weeks ago predicted that 2023 is actually going to be the best year yet for climate investing, at an estimated level of $1.7 trillion worldwide. So this investment is happening about 1.5 to 3 times faster than anyone predicted. And in the energy production space alone, companies have now announced 96 gigawatts of new clean power over the past 8 months, which is more than the total investment in clean power plants in the US from 2017 through 2021. And enough to power nearly 20 million homes. So the transition is happening, it's happening fast, and it's helping to drive decarbonization through heat pumps, electric vehicles, storage, new innovations to capture carbon, and to deploy solar and clean energy at the community scale. And much of those solutions you are going to hear more about today on Investor Day, directly from some of those entrepreneurs and innovators who are deploying them. So in addition, we've seen huge progress and announcements around domestic manufacturing as well, to build some of the components to these types of technologies right here in the US. So today, it is our distinct pleasure at Raise Green to share some of those heroic entrepreneurs and clean energy leaders who are pushing that shift forward and are ahead of the curve. And these are businesses that are on the front lines of the energy transition, working every day to create economic opportunity in communities, create new jobs, and solve the climate crisis while they do it. These are leaders that are innovating and deploying carbon cutting technologies block by block, school by school, neighborhood by neighborhood, port by port even, and house by house, and opening up access to everyone to invest in them through Raise Green. So, so far, since starting Raise Green back in 2017 and launching in 2020, we've been able to help catalyze investors to back climate tech companies like these, like those you'll hear from today. And we are proud to say that we've estimated that that's driven about 55,000 tons of carbon pollution reduction or avoidance. And for every $100 that are invested through our marketplace, historically, that's driven about 1,100 pounds of carbon pollution reductions per $100. So you can make a difference with your dollars, and we're offering you the opportunity to back these leaders through direct investments, to fund their work that will power our future, and to be able to make a healthy return while you invest in healthy, just, and sustainable futures for our community and our country and the world, really. So thank you. And without further ado, I will turn it over to our marketing manager, Ben DeLynn, who's going to be our MC today and introduce us to our companies. Over to you, Ben.
Thank you for the welcome and introduction, Franz. And again, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. Let's get going. Today, each issuer is going to share the story of their company, and it's your chance to hear directly from the issuers about how they're tackling the climate crisis head on. First off, some background on who we are and what to expect today. Raise Green is a US-based funding portal with offices at Greentown Labs in Boston, Massachusetts, and is registered with the SEC and FINRA to sell private exempt securities. We bring investors and companies together on our marketplace and have financed almost $7 million for climate solutions since launching the marketplace in 2020. As the funding portal, we perform due diligence on each of the offerings before they go live. We do not provide tax, accounting, legal, or financial advice. We encourage you to review the materials, do your own research, and seek your own counsel before making any investment decisions. Today, representatives from each of the projects will speak for about 5 to 8 minutes each. If you have any questions, please post them to the Q&A module at the bottom of the screen. They'll be answered in our Q&A section at the end after each issuer has had a chance to present. If you have project-specific questions that don't get covered today, please log into invest.raisegreen.com and ask them on the forum page at each company's offering. General investor inquiries can be directed to investors@raisegreen.com. The presenters won't talk about the specific terms of their securities and returns expected from their offerings, and you can instead find the information on invest.raisegreen.com, where their offering pages are located. They will tell you what your money will go into, what they're building, and how you can make a difference by investing today. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first presenter, Matt Sweetwood of Greener Process Systems.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks, friends. Appreciate the opportunity to present to this amazing audience and this amazing environmentally conscious audience. So I am grateful for that. I'm Matt Sweetwood, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Greener Process Systems. As you can see, we have offices in Boca Raton, Florida, where I'm located, and our lab and office in Napoli, Italy. Next slide, Em. So the problem that we aim to solve is that there are smokestacks all over the world. Probably some of you actually live in areas near there. The smokestacks are connected to furnaces, diesel engines, emit CO2, gaseous pollution, and heat. And the result of that is a catastrophic environmental and health problem that is worldwide. There have been many, many studies that have demonstrated this health problem and environmental problem, and we aim to solve that. In addition to that, smokestacks generate an enormous amount of heat, and that is in the form of wasted energy, which I'm going to talk a little bit about our systems. So my company, Greener Process Systems, we've developed the first modular system that uses a hermetic seal to capture maritime industrial emissions and CO2, and as I highlighted, to generate electricity through waste heat recycling. Next slide. So currently, emissions capture from maritime use and industrial use is over $1,000 an emitted ton. And our goal is to get that capture rate down to $1,000 or $100 less an emitted ton. And our systems, their differentiators are the fact that we have a modular approach. We use automated and advanced robotics. We have a very standardized integration system. As a bunch of chemical engineers and engineers, we have advanced chemistry. Our systems are unique, once again, relating to that hermetic seal that allow us to capture a CO2. And we have a revenue model through waste heat recovery by generating electricity from smokestacks. Next slide. I think that one you can click on the video. Is it running? Oh. We have a little video to demo our system right there. There you go. So this is an example of our maritime system. It's a system which sits on a barge or on a rail, and it creates a hermetic seal, as I mentioned, with a smokestack of any ocean-going ship, freighter, cargo ship, oil tanker, cruise ship even. Once again, the uniqueness of our system in creating that hermetic seal allows for a very, very efficient capture. We use advanced robotics to make sure that we can seal any smokestack at any angle. The emissions is captured in this system and eventually filtered. Our systems are capable of removing NOx, SOx, diesel particulate, heavy metals, volatile organic compounds, and they are 98% effective, creating a dry powder at the end of the filtration system. That dry powder can easily be recycled. Our systems, which I don't have in the video here, also are used in industrial use. And right now we have multiple contracts out here in the United States to various kinds of companies, steel companies, aluminum companies, chemical companies, in hopes to actually install our systems, make them emissions-free, pollution-free, and actually generate electricity for them to pay for the systems. In Europe, we're actually going to be installing our first system in a port just like that on a barge in Italy, and that project should kick off in the next 30 to 90 days. Next slide. Oh, other way. Our management team is highly experienced. I'm sure everybody talks. We're a bunch of good-looking guys. Our original founder, Enrico Festa, who actually is in Italy, he's the original inventor of the product. And Maurizio, his son, is also an engineer, mechanical and aeronautic engineer. My degrees, we actually had a conversation beforehand about degrees. I guess once you get to a certain age, doesn't matter. My degrees are in mathematics, but nevertheless, we're all very experienced operators. I've had several successful exits. Between us and our company, we actually have multiple patents. Greener itself possesses now 4 patents. And one of those patents is a very, very strong, wide-ranging patent on sealing smokestacks. So we look for that to be a revenue source for us in the future. Next slide. And that's it. Thank you. And we really appreciate and hope that you'll be willing to participate in our journey. Our goal is to make the Earth a cleaner and greener place through capturing emissions, generating electricity, capturing CO2, and making everybody more healthier and the world a better place to live. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Matt. I think with air pollution on the forefront of everyone's mind with recent wildfires, this is a critical solution. Very excited to see how you all commercialize. Next up, we have Lynn Heller of the Climate Access Fund representing the issuance Solar for Us. Lynn, excited to have you.
Well, thank you, Ben and Franz, and many thanks to the whole Raise Green team for an ongoing partnership. I think we can go ahead to the next slide. And before I talk specifically about the Solar for Us project, I wanted to provide a bit of context about community solar, which is the subject and the area in which this project is underway. As we all know, low-income communities and communities of color have disproportionately suffered the impacts of climate change, but they have largely not benefited in recent years from efforts to combat climate change through renewable energy generation. And of course, if we're not intentional about this inequity, we will risk reinforcing the continuing historical environmental and economic injustices. And in response to this inequity, over the past 8 to 10 years, legislators around the country, in the state of Maryland, where we're located, in 21 other states, and in the District of Columbia, have passed laws to enable community solar, which many of you may be familiar with, but in case not, community solar allows households to access solar power virtually, as well as, in the case of homeowners, by installing panels on their own rooftops. The way community solar works is that anyone who pays their own electricity bill, whether a homeowner or a renter, can sign up to pay a third party to generate solar on a commercial or industrial rooftop, a parking lot, or on land. The solar is then connected to the grid, and the household receives electricity as they usually do and get a credit on their utility bill for the solar power they already paid for. Thus, it's all done virtually. It's a great system. So what's the problem? The problem is that serving low-income households is more expensive for solar developers and their investors than serving market rate households. And installing solar on smaller rooftops and parking lots in the built environment is more expensive than installing solar on large tracts of land. So project returns are lower if developers are using market rate financing, which is typically the case. And as a result, few community solar projects are in fact being built in and for these historically disinvested communities. And the potential for many more of Maryland's 400,000 low-income households to benefit from solar power is not being met. And so this is where the Climate Access Fund and the Solar for Us project come in. And you can go ahead to the next slide. The Climate Access Fund is a nonprofit green bank that fills gaps in the market that are preventing more low-income households in Maryland from benefiting from community solar. We offer a credit enhancement product to developers that serve low-income households, and we directly develop and finance these community-centered projects in historically disinvested communities using low-cost capital that we raise from both public and private sources. So now the Solar for Us project. This is the Solar for Us project at Henderson Hopkins is our first demonstration project, and it has received national attention for its community-centered approach and its explicit goal of maximizing the benefits to the community in which the project is located, in this case, the Madison East End neighborhood of East Baltimore, where more than a third of family households live below the federal poverty line of $27,000 for a family of 4, and 90% of the population is Black. The project will be located on the rooftop of the Henderson Hopkins School, which is a K-8 public contract school with a strong community mission. The school has about 600 students, 95% of whom are Black and low income. 100% of the solar power generated by the project will be reserved for, we estimate, around 150 low-income families who are part of the school community. The families will receive a 25% discount on their utility bills, collectively saving over $1 million over a generation. The project will also offer energy efficiency services to participating households, will provide paid job training opportunities, and will include an after-school club focused on clean energy for the 6th grade students at the school. The Climate Access Fund hopes to replicate this project model across the state of Maryland and to share lessons learned so it can be replicated in other states, hopefully with the help of some of the federal Inflation Reduction Act dollars, billions of which are aimed at expanding low-income solar access through projects like the Henderson Hopkins project. And this crowdfunding raise in partnership with Raise Green will complete the project's capital stack. We exceeded our goal in our indications of interest phase with Raise Green, launched last year, and we are halfway to our target this year. I encourage you to go onto the offering page on the Raise Green website and watch our video, because the 6th graders that are interviewed in the video really say it all. The raise closes on July 15th, so now's the time to invest. Thank you so much.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Lynn. As someone who spent a lot of time in Baltimore, and it's where I got my degrees, I have a huge affinity for the city, and projects like this will be great for revitalizing otherwise overlooked neighborhoods. So incredibly excited to see how your offering goes. And last but certainly not least, we have Raise Green's first ever issuer, Peter Kreisa of NEIF, the National Energy Improvement Fund. So Peter, take us home.
Thank you, Ben. And again, just to reiterate Ben's point, like we are the first offerer on the platform and have had really enormous success in engaging a retail market and investing in the kinds of things we do, which I'll talk about in a second. It was interesting how we got to Raise Green in the first place. It was because of my daughter, who said, Daddy, you're investing, you have a great opportunity for investments, but it's all for people with a lot more money than I have. How can I make an investment with an impact? And we found Raise Green and built a platform doing this with them. And so just want to also congratulate Franz on his recent wedding, which we did personally, but just it's been a great partnership and a great compliant. And I want to make this really clear. We are a compliant lender, which I'll talk about later, but Raise Green's integrity and compliance is a huge part of what they're doing, and really important to me. So please advance the slide, Ben. So NEIF, the National Energy Improvement Fund, is a lender for energy efficiency, residential and commercial projects. And we focus on essential energy improvements. And, that's really the fundamental thing. The presenters previously, Lynn talked about the need for affordability in solar in people of in disadvantaged neighborhoods. And Matt talked about, big, giant carbon swings, but we focus on kind of like the core market of essential improvements for people that have to do this stuff every day. So you're the homeowner that is faced with having to replace your furnace to a more efficient system. You're the small business that has to replace your lighting with a more efficient lighting system. How do you do that? What's your options? And it all comes down to how do you pay for it? Because really, frankly, nobody wants to do this, right? Nobody, I mean, I shouldn't say that, but there's early adopters, but when people are basically confronted with this, they are saying, gee, I have a choice of putting in this, screened-in porch or granite countertops or heat pumps, right? And you know what they really think? They think they would like to do something more efficient. So it's all about where does it fit in the budget, and that's where NEIF has been focused. We come from a history and legacy of doing this. So about 20 years ago, I kind of converted a family lending business into an energy efficiency lender. We were Fannie Mae's first energy efficiency lender, energy loan lender. And that introduced me to this core competency of it's really contractors that drive this process, not the consumer or the small business. It's contractors that are brought in as the energy experts. So having a network of contractors that clearly understand how to do this and have the credibility to do it properly was the key component. So historically, we built a business that did that, and then you end up running programs for core things like heating, lighting, HVAC, all those things. And then we ended up running programs for states and utilities and other programs. So the opportunity is really important because the differentiation is most consumers, and you've all experienced this, when you go into replace an HVAC system, they'll come in, here's the typical sales model. It's a good, better, best sales model. Oh, we can put in this for $7,000. We can do this for $10,000. We can do this for $15,000. And we have 0% financing for 6 months. And then you look at that and you realize that it's like, 30% after that, so it's not really financing. It's all teaser and really ineffectual kind of not financing, just promotional stuff. And that's typically offered through big finance companies and big national banks that don't specialize in this stuff. So we wanted to make energy efficiency essential improvements more like auto finance, where you go in and say, okay, I'm going to have this thing for 7 years. I want a 7-year loan at a fair rate. I don't want to lien on my property. I don't want a home equity loan. What do I do? So that's our core product, but then it's enhanced. And this is really our unique differentiation. We know how to run programs for states and utilities. So a utility, like right now, we're running all the New Jersey programs for JCP&L, Atlantic City Electric, Rockland Energy. They will have some dollars from state programs to subsidize that, so they can offer programs for higher efficiency, and that makes the whole thing work. And as both presenters talked about, the federal money coming in to these programs is going to be enormous, and the states are going to get just tremendous amounts of money that they're not going to know what to do with, right? So then they hire a company like us to be the lender to manage a rebate program or a financing program for a specific state or utility. So the opportunities for us are pretty big to offer more affordable financing for more homeowners. We do this in 3 disciplines: residential, commercial, and we also offer advanced funding on rebates for contractors, because oftentimes some of these rebates programs sound very seductive, but it takes the contract or the program manager 6 months to pay it, and the contractors can't float that time frame. So we get down to where we are where the rubber meets the road, where the consumer is buying the product, where we want them to buy a greener product. How do we help them pay for it? How do we help the contractor support it? How do we provide the contractor with greater training on being more technically adept? And that's our focus. We have a team of about 50 people that's doing this. Offices in Allentown and Denver. Ben mentioned, the smoke coming down here. Again, we're all seeing the impacts, and the carbon impact is pretty dramatic that we see, and we provide those benefit reports. The most important thing to acknowledge is we went down this path as a certified benefit corporation, a certified B Corp, because that's the way my parents taught me how to run American capitalism. We believe in providing a holistic experience in terms of, yes, I want to make money, but I want to do the right thing. So that's our mission, and our impact. My partner, Matthew Brown, Laura Nelson, all feel the same way. And we have been, again, a great partner with Raise Green and continue to be out on the platform and doing really well with them. So thank you. Thank you, Ben.
Thank you, Peter. Always happy to have you talk and share the story of NEIF. You guys do incredible work. And that wraps up our presentation section for Investor Day. Now we're going to move into our Q&A. I see that we already have one Q&A in the module below. As a reminder, please feel free to submit any questions you may have. It's a great time to get the answers live instead of getting them typed out on the offering page asynchronously. So without further ado, we'll get into the discussion. The first question is for greener process systems from John Knox. And John asks, for the greener exhaust capture system, do any greenhouse gas emissions escape? Also, how are these gases converted into solid particles for disposal? So Matt, I'll let you take that.
Okay, sure. So because we create that hermetic seal with the smokestack, the answer is, and I'm giving a feel answer, right? Because nothing in the world is 100%. But we're going to say we get as close to 100% of capturing the CO2 that's emitted from the stack. The trick with capturing CO2, greenhouse gases, from a smokestack is that you can't do it from dirty air. And so the magic of our system is that we maintain the heat of the system because of that hermetic seal. And as a result, we get two benefits. Benefit number one is, unlike some of the other systems that have existed, we don't require additional energy in the system to maintain the heat of the exhaust. Because in order to capture CO2, you have to maintain the heat of the exhaust through the system. So our system filters essentially all of the bad stuff, the pollution, and then has hot air, CO2, coming out the end. So the CO2 is not converted into a dry powder. The CO2 is captured at the end. And depending upon the location, depending upon the quantity, and so on, that CO2 can either be stored, it can be put into a pipeline. We actually have a quotation out to a company that's near the CO2 pipeline here in the United States. In addition to that, it gives me a little opportunity to talk about a very special project that we're working on, which would be, I call the holy grail of greenhouse gases or CO2 emissions, which is a NSF grant that we've applied for, which would allow us to dissociate the CO2 into separate carbon and oxygen, and that would certainly solve the whole worldwide problem if we were able to accomplish that. And we've had some success in the lab with that. So the answer to the question is, essentially, we capture all of the CO2 at the end, depending upon the application and so on. What happens to that CO2 is a different story.
Excellent. Thank you, Matt.
Thanks for the question too, by this. Great question. Great question.
It is always love hearing the questions that come up during these discussions. The next question is for the National Energy Improvement Fund. What is the process for states to select a default lender and administrator for customer energy improvements? So Peter, I will let you take that one.
Yeah, it's interesting. Each state obviously is different, but there's the National Association of State Energy Offices, which is kind of the consortium of all the state energy offices, which is influences their decisions. And typically, it's an RFP-based process where they will hire a administrator for a rebate program or an administrator for a finance program. And sometimes the finance programs can also be justifiably, they said, like, we would like to have all our, like, I don't know, I'm picking a state, I don't know, North Dakota credit unions involved in a financing program, which is great, but who's gonna control that? So there's two models, one with a centralized lender and one with a kind of a centralized administrator that engages all the local capital sources. But typically it's an RFP based process, and but driven a lot through this NASIO or organizations that are engaged in this thing. Excellent.
Thank you, Peter. For the Climate Access Fund, also from John Knox. In the Climate Access Fund project, won't most of the power generated by the school-based clean energy project be used by the school itself? How much energy is expected to be left over for use by near low-income residents?
That's a great question. Thank you, John. Actually, in the case of this project, 100% of the energy that's generated on the rooftop by this particular project will be reserved for low-income households. So it'll go into the grid and then low-income households can sign up. None of the power will be consumed by the school. They actually already have a small solar array on the school rooftop that was installed back in 2016. But it's a giant roof. And so we went to them and said, well, what are you doing with the rest of the roof? Why don't you put community solar? And they actually were so excited about benefiting their students' families that they're leasing us their rooftop space for $1 a year, which is, needless to say, not a replicable replicable model, but it's tremendous for the project economics of this particular project.
Excellent. Thank you. And that's a pretty incredible relationship, $1 a year. I'd love to see that level of commitment. For greener process systems from Ben Williamson, are you factoring in longer term wind down or product pivots? How long do you expect to be a company with this product for as the world looks to decarbonize? Being mindful of not enabling business as usual and continuity of using fossil fuels.
Okay, great. I actually love this question. I always call this is like the iPhone question. Like, how long will the iPhone be good for? So in the startup world, you begin a company and, you sort of look at your trajectory of what's going to happen. And I think that on my company and our technology, even as it exists right now, I mean, has decades worth of life in it. If you look at our industrial side, we have projects that we're looking to start. We have quotations out with companies in aluminum manufacturing, in steel manufacturing, chemical companies, all sorts of industries that are out there that have no ability in the next decades to convert from the furnaces that they use. It's just not going to happen. To have electric or an alternative source of fuel to power those furnaces is just an unlikely scenario. I mean, certainly, it will eventually happen, of course, but we're looking for 20, 30-year life cycle on that. On the maritime side, there are 2,000 ports. There are tens of thousands of freighters out there. The timeline for them to convert or go out of service is in decades. It could be 40 to 50 years. Typical freighter lifespan is 30 to 40 years. And then you're talking about what system are they going to employ? We're aware that electrification is going into ports worldwide where the ships get hooked up and they run on electric power. There's no standardization. The electric grid can't support it. There's all sorts of issues that go with that. So we're going to work side by side with electrification. So we view our technology as not even a short term. You can call us transitional, but ultimately the iPhone is transitional. What do you consider a transitional technology? I would safely say that 20 years, our business will be continuing to grow. And if you consider the fact that most of the factories in this country have no emissions captured, they have none. So let's start by capturing those emissions, and then they can start over the next decades looking to convert the way that they actually manufacture. So like I said, I believe that we have a very long-term business, and in the environmental world, in the startup world, I would say it's as long-term as it gets.
Excellent. Thank you, Matt. Fantastic response. Next, we have a question for the National Energy Improvement Fund submitted before our webinar began. They asked, can you talk a bit more about your loan program recipients? Who are they, and just how impactful is your program for them?
Yeah, it's interesting. You think about the way of definition of low to moderate income and the world in general. About half of our loans are made to consumers who fall into the LMI designation. But I really think about our target being, I don't know, I hate to say this, like the average American, like the average homeowner, the average, whoever you think it is. We have a very high credit score profile. This is not a bad credit program. These are high credit score people, and our delinquency has reflected that for like almost 20 years. Like it's less than 1% charge off on these kinds of loans, which is about a third of what the national standards are for credit cards or other things. And average credit score is 740, average credit score in America is 700, but that's across all income levels. So what you end up having is people of good quality, regardless of income, who pay their bills, who want to improve their energy efficiency. And that's what our programs are focused on. And so I've always been very pleased about that our delinquency is not, if you look at it by income level or whatever, it's delinquency is the same. If you pay your bills, you pay your bills. And that's who this is focused on. The impact for most of these people is three things. It's certainly energy efficiency and reduced energy bills, but it's improved comfort. And like they're living in a home that has drafts and where insulation makes a big deal beyond just energy efficiency. It's all the whole, the whole lifestyle thing. And I think that's the greatest impact that we've had. We can track carbon savings and everything, and that's really important, but it's more about living your life in a comfortable, energy efficient environment in a way that you can do it affordably. So I think I'm very pleased with the way that we've extended this to the entire kind of spectrum of people that do this stuff. Certainly we will get programs that are focused on urban neighborhoods or true lower income that would be then are typically credit supported somehow. So we like those as well. So we do those things. From a commercial standpoint, it's typically the people that are left out of these kinds of programs on the big level. I was like, oh, it's the big energy producing thing. It's like, what about the guy that owns the dry cleaner? What about the realtor's office? What does he do? And that's kind of our sweet spot of programs that we run to help them put in more efficient systems, lighting, and all those things. So you hate to think about middle America being the people that are forgotten, but they are. And so we're trying to do this to help them, the entrepreneur, the guy that the two income family that's trying to figure out a way to make their house more efficient. So that's our focus.
I think one thing that stands out about the National Energy Improvement Fund to me is that the accessibility of the program. It really is, as you said, for the everyman, the average person. And it also makes it relatively low lift in that it's iterative, it's small steps. You don't have to do everything at once. It's not this giant transition. It can be at your own pace. And I think that's pretty significant.
Well, and the way you just said that, Ben, and we consciously have adopted this go greener mantra. Like, it's like, okay, I would love everybody to have a Tesla and have solar on their houses, and I would love everybody to do everything all at once, but they can't. So what do you do in baby steps? Just go greener, just do something better every day, and just put the system in that is better than what you had before. Because change can't happen overnight. Change is incremental, right? So I believe. So, that's where we focus our world.
There's a quote that circulates at Raise Green and says, you can't do everything at once, you just have to start somewhere. And I think NEIF perfectly represents that philosophy. Sticking with you, Peter, another question. Does NEIF anticipate helping to fund newly minted contractors specializing in heat pump appliance installation? There seems to be a growing need.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. We're seeing the oil and gas guys obviously they realize they're smart. They realize they're flipping over to heat pumps, and we work closely with electrification, the buzzword. That buzzword of electrification, I find like I'm expecting Nikola Tesla to come in like with a Edison light bulb or something. I don't like the word, but it's a thing, right? We are very focused on helping contractors adopt to heat pump technology because that's where it's all going, right? So you got the manufacturers, Mitsubishi and Fujitsu and Daikin. They're like, okay, that's the game they all have to play. If you're a contractor, you got to play in this game. So we are trying to help them learn how to adopt the technology, and new contractors who want to get in the space. And this is important to understand. When we approve a contractor to participate in our programs, we want them to have 3 years of business and solid financials and be a legitimate, reputable contractor. The only time we'll make an exception is if it's that guy that says, I've been the lead installer for this company for 10 years, and now I'm starting my own company. And we researched that a little bit, but we know that he knows what he's doing. So I think take de novo people, it was when there was like energy auditing, you could take somebody who had no experience whatsoever, and you could make them into an energy auditor. You can't do that with somebody who's installing sophisticated HVAC systems. They have to have technical knowledge. And just give me 30 more seconds. It's very interesting, the whole DEI thing in terms of the contractor world and energy efficiency. I'm on the board of the Building Performance Association, the National Association of all these kinds of things. And so DEI for employees of contractors is really important. But I said, what about entrepreneurship? How do we foster more, people of color who are starting companies? How do we do this? I don't know the answer. I'm just saying that's to me the thing that I'd like to see, because I know there are urban areas that are underserved because the contractors that serve the urban areas are not the best contractors. They're Joe pickup truck guys. and it's the guy's brother-in-law installing a gas furnace in his house, in his row home in North Philly. And that's not a good thing, right? So that's an area that I personally would like to focus my efforts on more, is getting that world better educated and better engaged.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Peter. And a couple more questions left from our Q&A module, but please continue to ask. This is a fantastic discussion so far. For greener process systems, Matt, can you please say more about your client base and your existing contracts to deliver in the EU? What is the timeline on that, and how do you anticipate it unfolding?
Okay, great. Let's talk about the EU first. So we have been working on a project there because that's where the original, our technology was originally invented. And we have a contract to install our SET system, Ship Emissions Treatment and Harbor, in a port in Italy. That project is funded by the European Union's Green Ports Initiative and the Italian Ministry of the Environment. The project actually has been probably 2 to 3 years in the working, and it should kick off. We got the final approval from the government actually verbally about a month ago, and the paperwork should follow shortly, and we're looking to begin work on that in September. That's a 3.2 million euro build of one of our systems. And we've been in heavy discussions with the port. We're going to put that first system in and obviously look to install additional systems. It'll be our test. It'll be the system that we use to demo to move into ports here in the United States as the regulations go into effect here, requiring ports to reduce pollution. In the United States, we've heavily focused on industry. We have contracts out waiting for a positive response, and I'll explain how our procedure works. In steel factory, 2 aluminum factories, a chemical company, a glass factory, and those are the companies that have obviously heavy manufacturing. The way our sales process works is we walk in there, we offer them a phase 1 study, which is more like a feasibility study, which will tell them the benefits that they can get from a system like ours, for example, in terms of carbon credits, where they can benefit from the Inflation Reduction Act, because there's significant funds in there for air pollution capture, and we'll give them the amount of money and the amount of electricity that their systems can get. This is a very, very important part, because while everybody likes to be environmentally friendly, to be able to generate enough electricity to pay for the system and actually generate revenue is obviously very exciting, and we can give them those numbers in a phase 1 study. Once we get through the phase 1 study, we then will act as a systems integrator or an architect of the system, bringing in technology and install those systems, which can range anywhere from $5 to $20 million. The whole process should take somewhere between 3 months to 18 months from the time we first touch the client to the time the system is actually working. And we're very close right now to landing several contracts here.
That's great news to hear. Continuing on, we have a question for the Climate Access Fund on that $1 lease for the school roof solar, which is brilliant. Is that agreed for a set period of time, 5 to 10 years or more, or could it be changed?
Great question. It is actually for the life of the project. So it's written into the lease agreement, and we have options to renew, but same terms. So they're not allowed to change the terms. I did also just want to mention, because Peter brought up a really important point, which is the creditworthiness of customers. And because this project is 100% for low-income customers, I did want to just add that we have one of the sort of built-in guarantees we have is a grant that we received from the Maryland Energy Administration that will back up losses resulting from low-income customer defaults for a period of 7 years to take us through the tax equity recapture period, and also to take us through the period of time where we expect we will have weeded through non-paying low-income customers. Because the beauty of community solar as opposed to single-family rooftop solar is if you don't pay your bills after certain period, and then you're removed from the list and you're replaced with somebody else who presumably will pay their bills. So I did want to just mention, because I think that is a really important point that sometimes can make folks nervous when it comes to low income customers who may or may not have any credit score, or certainly a good credit score.
Fantastic. Thank you, Lynn. And we have a question for all of our presenters, focusing a little bit more on the fundraising side of this journey. Do you have any advice for companies in the climate or clean energy space looking to fundraise, looking to commercialize, looking to grow? From your experience with Raise Green, is there anything you've learned that you'd like to share?
Well, I'll just say Raise Green has been a terrific partner and very patient as we have adapted our project economics to the new terms of the Inflation Reduction Act, which kind of came midstream through this process. And Raise Green has just been a terrific pleasure to work with. And as I think, Peter, you had said, brings additional comfort given the really strict adherence to the compliance piece of the crowdfunding. So I'd encourage anyone to approach Raise Green if you need to raise some money for your company.
Yeah, I think that I'm just going to add to that you have to be flexible. So if we look at how we started and our offerings when we started, you have to be aware of what's going on in the market. And certainly when you participate with Raise Green, it forces you to really carefully and in a very exacting way look at your offering, and it forces you to change your offering in the way you present yourself in a way that is going to be favorable. And I think if I look at startups are always interested in their deck. And if I look at the deck that we produced when we first started and the one that exists now, and I look at the Raise Green offering page, there's a lot of evolution in that. And so I think that's my biggest advice is you need to be very flexible. You need to learn, keep your ears and eyes open, and really change. Don't be afraid to change the way you present yourself or change your business model, which we've done several times along the way. And particularly in the environmental area, where in the middle of what we were doing, the Inflation Reduction Act came out, which provided, in the case of maritime, $3 billion for port air pollution and all sorts of other things. So being flexible, be willing to change, listen, be open, and do things like Raise Green. It makes you cross your I's and dot your T's.
And I'll just add two more things from two different perspectives. Matt talked about the investor, the company standpoint. The assistance that Raise Green provides you in terms of professionalizing the offering is fantastic, and getting you on this platform of people that are like-minded, tremendous. But from an investor standpoint, if you're like a classic crowdfunding investor, what's what I'm looking for? Not the comfort level that you have investing through a platform like Raise Green, because of their intense focus on compliance, is really important to me. So I think they handle both things extremely well. So that's my go Frowns.
Thank you, Ashurs. Very much appreciate all of those answers. And in particular, Matt, I like your response. We've asked that question a number of times, and I think you hit the nail on the head in a way that really hadn't been mentioned previously. Raise Green and crowd investing is a great way to calibrate the terms of your offering. If you're offering securities, it's a really good way to understand what the market and what the crowd is looking for, as well as understand how to best pitch your company. There are different circumstances and different scenarios, in which case different elements and aspects of your company's information story may be more relevant, may be more poignant for certain folks. And Raise Green allows you to calibrate and test that. So we're incredibly fortunate to have these incredible issuers and innovators on our platform. They're out in the real world driving change, driving progress, and we couldn't be more proud to have them offering securities through Raise Green. And with that, I don't see any more questions in our Q&A. But please remember, you can always ask questions on the Q&A or forum section of an offerings page on invest.raisegreen.com. And with that, I'll hand it back to Franz to close us out for today.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Ben. And thank you very, very much, Matt, Lynn, and Peter. Tremendous presentations, and you did great work answering some very tough and detailed questions. So we are all about transparency and access here at Raise Green. So appreciate you coming on and going onto the hot seat. And hopefully everyone got their questions answered. If you haven't, or you have further questions, or you're watching this and something comes to mind, please do go to the offering page of each of these respective issuers, where you can post a question that goes directly to them. We like to hound them to get answers back. So that's invest.raisegreen.com. For anyone considering joining the community, you can join for free just by signing up and creating an account. You can browse all of the offerings, and you can invest in most of them for as little as $100. So it's easy to get started, and we certainly encourage you to check all of them out and ask as many questions as you want. We want the educational aspect of it to also be enriching for all of our members. So it's as good a time as any to put some money to work in the clean energy economy. You have some options here, and certainly encourage you to check them out and consider it. And if you are considering an offering, which it looks like a few of the folks who are in the audience, just knowing some of them may be considering, you want to follow in the footsteps of these heroic climate entrepreneurs who are pushing the industry forward, and you have a company that you're working on and need to raise capital for and want to do it in an inclusive way, we are standing by at all times. I would love to work with you to launch a community round and to help you get the capital that your company needs to grow. Similarly, if you need enterprise partners on accounting, insurance, tax equity, other aspects of your business, marketing, et cetera, we have partners in those places as well. So look forward to engaging with all of you further. And thank you so much for spending some of your Tuesday morning or afternoon with us, depending on what coast you're on. Much appreciated, and we'll see you at the next Investor Day.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you.